Everyday altruism usually implies conscious, selfless intent. We help others and expect nothing in return. Evolutionary biology discards intent entirely. In this field, altruism is defined strictly as a transaction of reproductive fitness, an action that reduces the actor's expected number of offspring while increasing the offspring of another. Consider the alarm call of the vervet monkey, a social primate found in East Africa, known for using distinct vocalizations to signal threats. When one screams an alarm, it allows the rest of the troop to escape, but it simultaneously draws the predator's attention, increasing personal risk. This creates a direct paradox for the logic of natural selection. Charles Darwin, the 19th century naturalist who authored On the Origin of Species, argued that evolution optimizes for individual survival and reproduction. Under strict Darwinian logic, a genetic trait that commands its host to sacrifice its own fitness is a dead end. Any gene causing an organism to lower its own survival odds should be mathematically eliminated in a single generation. Biological altruism represents a mathematical contradiction that challenges the internal logic of evolutionary theory. Mid-20th century theorists often relied on a misconception that animals sacrifice themselves for the good of the group or the survival of the species. This group selection logic ignores a fatal vulnerability to free riders. Imagine a population where every member pays a small caloric cost to generate a large benefit for the group. In this model, the overall energy and survival of the population increases. If a single mutation introduces a selfish individual, the system breaks. This mutant consumes the benefits generated by its neighbors, but refuses to pay the cost to contribute. Because the selfish mutant absorbs benefits without spending energy, it maintains higher individual fitness. It will out-reproduce the altruists. Over generations, selfishness swans the population until the group structure collapses entirely. Biologist Richard Dawkins popularized the view that because groups are so easily subverted from within, selection must operate at the level of the gene. He is an evolutionary biologist who introduced the gene-centered view of evolution in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. Without a specific structural mechanism to protect them, altruists are mathematically doomed to be exploited and eradicated by selfish counterparts. To solve this puzzle, we use the one-shot prisoner's dilemma applied to biological fitness. The prisoner's dilemma is a standard game theory model showing why two individuals might not cooperate, even if it appears in their best interest to do so. If both organisms play the altruist strategy, they mutually cooperate for a fitness of 11. However, if a selfish organism meets an altruist, the selfish individual extracts maximum fitness, 20, while the altruist receives 0. We can calculate the population-wide fitness of each strategy, WSS and WAA, based on the probability of encountering a specific partner. In a population where interactions are completely random, the probability of meeting an altruist is identical for everyone. Resolving the equations with these equal probabilities proves that the selfish strategy, WSS, will always output a higher number than the altruist strategy. Game theory provides the proof. As long as biological interactions are random, selfishness is the only mathematically viable outcome. There is a single variable that can flip the outcome of the prisoner's dilemma: donor-recipient correlation. If organisms stop interacting randomly and preferentially interact with their own type, conditional probabilities change. The probability of an altruist meeting another altruist climbs toward 100%. This correlation inverts the math, causing the altruist's fitness to surge past the selfish individual. The biological mechanism driving this correlation is kin selection. Because relatives share identical genes by common descent, an altruistic gene can spread by helping other carriers of that same gene. This threshold is defined by Hamilton's rule. The theorem states altruism evolves if the recipient's genetic relatedness, multiplied by the benefit received, exceeds the reproductive cost to the actor. We see this in the haplodiploid genetics of social insects. Haplodiploidy is a sex determination system where males are haploid and females are diploid, resulting in sisters sharing 75% of their genes. Sterile workers maximize their own fitness by raising sisters rather than having their own offspring. Under this lens, altruism is a calculated strategy engineered by genes to maximize their own replication across a network of related bodies. Hamilton's rule explains strong altruism, where an organism reduces its absolute number of offspring. but biologists also study weak altruism. In this scenario, an organism boosts its own absolute fitness, but boosts its partner's absolute fitness even more. This payoff matrix for weak altruism shows different values. Mutual cooperation yields 30 for both, while a non-altruist paired with a weak altruist gets 20, and the altruist gets 10. In this matrix, the weak altruist strategy yields a higher absolute payoff than the non-altruist strategy, regardless of what the opponent does. 30 is better than 20, and 10 is better than 0. Because weak altruism guarantees a net individual gain, it can evolve in completely random groups without the need for kin selection. By slightly altering the definition of sacrifice from an absolute loss to a relative loss, cooperation becomes an individually advantageous, mathematically dominant strategy. We still have to address biological altruism occurring between unrelated individuals or entirely different species. Robert Trivers solved this with the theory of reciprocal altruism. He proposed altruistic acts are favored by selection if likely to be returned, shifting the measurement from short-term to lifetime fitness. This mechanism requires repeated interactions over time and the cognitive ability to remember and punish those who refuse to reciprocate. Vampire bats are a classic example. A bat failing to feed for 2 nights will starve. Successful bats regurgitate blood to feed starving roostmates, who are expected to return the favor when roles are reversed. This mirrors the tit-for-tat strategy, where an individual cooperates first, then mimics the partner's previous move. In long-term simulations, this dominates. This math bridges the species barrier in relationships like that of the cleaner fish. The larger fish avoids eating the cleaner because the long-term benefit of being cleaned outweighs the short-term meal. When you introduce the axis of time, the short-term cost of altruism transforms into a profitable long-term investment. Natural selection uses 3 solutions to bypass the zero-sum game of survival: genetic correlation, relative advantage, and temporal memory. This raises a philosophical question. If all biological cooperation is driven by calculated genetic math, does real altruism actually exist? The answer depends on the distinction between biological fitness and psychological motivation. These are independent variables. Consider the act of adoption. Human beings often spend immense biological resources on an entirely unrelated child, yielding 0 reproductive payoff. Philosopher Elliot Sober argues that evolutionary theory does not imply humans are motivated by egoism. Elliot Sober is a prominent philosopher of biology who specializes in the conceptual foundations of evolutionary theory. The selfish gene is a metaphor. In humans, evolving a genuine psychological desire to help others may have been nature's most efficient algorithm for ensuring the survival of our species.